Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing some pretty big news coming from the San Jose Sharks camp today, and that is that they have fired head coach Bob Boughner along with the rest of his staff. Now, this move is surprising, but not because Bob Boughner was such a fantastic head coach, and so it's very surprising that they would want to get rid of him, but actually just surprising with how late this actually ended up coming in the off-season. Most teams decide to fire their head coach maybe a couple of weeks after their season ends, and since the San Jose Sharks did not make the playoffs, their season came to an end in late April, and it is over 2 months since then from when we got now this news of firing Bob Boughner. So it's kind of crazy that it came this late, which is why it was extremely unexpected. However, it is a move that is going to be welcomed by me, as well as I'm sure many Sharks fans, as we were all kind of just waiting for the pin to drop in this situation. Bob Boughner had done very little to advance the San Jose Sharks prospects, not just literally their prospects, but their prospects as a team forward over these past couple of years. You see, Bob Boughner first arrived in San Jose as an assistant coach with Peter DeBoer in 15-16 and clearly left a good impression with him being able to get that team, or help get that team, to a Stanley Cup Finals for the first time ever. After a couple of years, he would eventually leave the San Jose Sharks to go become head coach for the Florida Panthers for a couple of years. He would miss the playoffs both times, but would land another head coaching job in the middle of the 1920 season with the San Jose Sharks. He took over for his former, head coach that he reported to just a few years ago, Peter DeBoer. And there was a slight improvement in how the Sharks played in that 1920 season when Bob Boughner did take over, but honestly not all that significantly. However, it was certainly enough to get him another look going into the following year, 2021. However, as we know, the 2021 season was a bit of a mess, shortened year, not a lot of prep time, not a lot of practice time because it was a very condensed schedule, things like that. And so while there was very little improvement, the Sharks still ended up being 7th worst in the league, getting the 7th overall pick in the draft. It wasn't necessarily the best sort of chance for Bob Boughner to show off what he could do with the team, and so he was given one more season, the 21-22 season this past year, to try and show what he can do with a full season, a full training camp, these practice times in between in a less condensed schedule. And he really didn't do much. It was a slightly better performance once again from the previous year, but the Sharks ended up 11th last in the league, 11th overall pick in the upcoming draft, and this is probably one of the worst positions to fill in because not only do they not get a super high pick in the draft, but they still end up making the playoffs. So it's not a very good position to be in. And so they're at the Sharks, they're at the end of their rope, and their big sort of excuse, I guess you could say here, is that they want to give the new GM who is going to be stepping in, who the Sharks have yet to decide on completely, they want to give him sort of a clean slate to work with so he can decide which players stay, which players go, and most importantly, who exactly is going to lead this team to try and get them back to the playoffs, because that's really been the San Jose Sharks messaging this entire time. But even if there were no real, no new GM, I feel as though a firing of Bob Boughner was indeed sort of a long time coming, even if it did come a couple months after you might expect that news to show up. Now, who exactly is going to take over as San Jose Sharks head coach? Well, I had said originally back in my video discussing of whether or not the Sharks would fire Bob Boughner that it would be interesting to get sort of a new voice in the locker room, but I suspect we probably won't get that. I imagine the Sharks would actually go with a bit more of an experienced voice, just because the general messaging from the Sharks this offseason has been trying to get back to a playoff spot, and it's kind of risky at that point to pick up like a new blood type of coach because he doesn't necessarily have that NHL coaching experience. It would be much more easier to just fall back on a tried and true name like we saw when Paul Maurice just got rehired. Even though Paul Maurice doesn't have experience winning, he does have experience getting teams to the playoffs, and maybe that is just what certain teams are looking for. It's certainly what the Sharks are looking for, so don't necessarily expect the Sharks to sort of go off the board here when it comes to a head coaching pick. Class dismissed.